Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the MedTech field. Hosted by Zilko Rima and Kash Ikram. Hi everybody, and welcome to Our MedTech Lives. Today we have a real veteran of the MedTech industry, Matt Curran. Matt is 25 years plus in industry, starting out at a company called Surgicraft, spending the majority of his career in the multinational corporate Medtronic, but then went to a complete startup called NanoFlex, which has some incredible technology that I'm really looking forward to getting into. Without further ado, welcome Matt Curran.
Thank you, Kash. Thank you, Silky. Yes, you know, one time you used to be the youngest person in the room, and now being considered an old-time industry veteran. It's sort of, unfortunately, it's true.
Join the club, my friend. Join the club. You still look extremely young, though.
I've got a filter that puts me at 1997.
All righty, Matt, let's get to know you a little bit. You hold a biochemistry degree, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true.
What first drew you into MedTech in our
So after I finished university, I was looking at various different things. I was looking at environmental protection. I was looking into the standard graduate recruitment jobs in the UK, the milk round. Not really finding anything that appealed. I had a job as a graduate barman, as many people in the UK did as soon as they finished. And then I managed to get myself an internship with a small company in the northwest of England called Quantec Image Processing that was doing a non-contact measurement system for scoliosis, a spine measurement system. Okay. My job was basically lifting heavy things and making tea. And from there, that was my first exposure into the industry. Yeah, I thought it was great. It was something that hadn't really occurred to me before, and that's sort of how I got into it.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't sound like it's only coincidence, because this is our number one answer. But when we look at your career, which is impressive, did you have a vision for your career at the beginning, or did it all happen?
The one thing that I had very early in my career was wanting to get into sales, because from the earliest part of my career and looking at commercial industries, I thought, I want to know where the money comes from. I want to know how companies make money, how they attract customers, how they grow. And the most obvious way of doing that is understanding what the interaction is directly with the customers. If you can't sell the company's products, it doesn't matter how good they are, you have no business. So there was I had a clear idea that I wanted to understand the sales process and understand how companies actually got money in through the door by their interaction with the customers.
Amazing. Talk us through how then your next step then, when you started as a company, you started in sales, and then?
So I did the internship with Quantec. I actually did an internship with them for a couple of months in the US, looking at a marketing plan for entry into the US market.
Okay.
Came back to the UK.
Did you go to the US?
Sorry?
Did you go to the US?
Yeah, I was in the US. I was in Morristown, New Jersey, and then did a tour around with a spine contact measurement system in the back of a red Ford Windstar, doing demos around the country.
How old were you then?
I was 22.
Oh, wow. What a great experience at 22.
So that was fun. And then came back and was looking to go back to work to help the business in the US.
Mm-hmm.
The visa that I was applying for, I was told I couldn't get because I was too young to have the relevant experience for an experienced worker visa.
Okay.
So I ended up looking for different roles and ended up as a trainee sales rep with a company called Surgicraft. So at the time, I was also offered a job with J&J Orthopedics, and I chose Surgicraft over J&J. And to this day, I'm not sure whether I made the right decision, but it seemed to go all right after that.
You know what? What's incredible is I did the same thing. I went up to their office, and it was a product manager job, and there was a desk with 5 product managers on one side of it and another 5 on the other. And I thought, do I want to be number 11 in this team, or do I want to go to this smaller company and be number 1? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be number 1 over there. Yeah, it's I know a lot of people aspire to J&J, and it's the one of the major leaders in our industry and has been for many years.
Yeah.
But it's about choosing the type of company, the type of career you want.
Yeah. So Surgigraph was very small. It was very UK distributor. There was a small manufacturing base. They were doing spine orthopedics, and I was offered a trainee position with J&J in the hips and knees division.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, a very good job. And at the time, for whatever strange reasons I had things going around in my head, I thought, no, the difference of £3,500 between the J&J offer and the Surgigraph offer, it was worth going to Surgigraph. So as I say, to this day, I'm still not sure whether I made the right decision or not.
But at the end, you choose a giant, Medtronic. So how did that happen then?
I didn't choose Medtronic. So I
okay.
worked for Surgigraph. At the time, they were the distributors of a spine company called Softmodanic.
Yes.
Medtronic bought Softmodanic, and then they did what Medtronic does, which is terminate all the distributors and go direct.
Yes.
So we went from having a very cutting-edge spine portfolio to a very sort of traditional, old-fashioned spine implant portfolio, but mostly based on steel rectangles being wired into spines. So that didn't last too long, and I actually then moved from Surgigraph to a small ENT company called Zomed Trees, then Zomed.
Yes.
And that was driven mainly by the application process and being hired was driven by a sales rep who I was selling against when I was working for Surgigraph. So Surgigraph also did some knee sports med reconstruction stuff. And there was a sales rep at the Droitwich knee meeting that I was at.
Yes.
A guy called Mark Kerrigan, and he had the sort of snazzy product range of Linvatec that everybody wanted to talk to, and I had this range of Surgigraph products that no one wanted to talk to. And then when I got to the interview for Zomed, Mark was the new sales manager for Zomed, and he said, I recognize you. You were the guy with the crap product range that kept turning up in the morning and staying all day. I like that. So that was the basis of how that interview started that got me into Zomed.
Amazing.
So yeah, I was with Zomed for about 18 months, and then they were also acquired by Medtronic. So that was the time. That was the time in the late 90s where Medtronic just acquired company after company after company. The sort of Bill George years.
Yeah. Either that, or they wanted you by hook or by crook.
I would not be so just so arrogant as to think that. So yeah, I was Zomed became part of Medtronic, and we were Medtronic Zomed, and then Medtronic ENT. So I was there for a while. And then the Zomed guys got invited, Zomed management in the UK got invited to an all Medtronic meeting, and they came back and they said, there's this talent management thing that we don't know anything about, but we're supposed to send you on this course. It's like, okay. Whatever. And then very soon afterwards, they say, no, we're not sending you on a course. There's a job in CRDM, which was the sort of glory division of pacemakers and ICDs. Yes. We're putting you up for this job because we're told we have to. So I went off for an interview to be a sales rep for the pacemakers. So I was based in Scotland at the time.
Okay.
So I did a little bit of research. I went into a couple of hospitals and sort of asked about Medtronic pacemakers because I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And turned up for the interview with a Scottish guy called Laurie Quinn, who'd been in sales of medical device sales and cardiology sales for decades, even by the time I met him.
Right.
And the interview seemed to go well. And eventually he offered me the job. And afterwards he said, the reason he hired me was because I came in and smiled. He said, everybody else just came in and was really nervous, and you just smiled like you didn't care. He said, that was the difference, is that you were sort of calm and relaxed.
Yes. You've always been calm and relaxed.
Right at the start in Surgigraph, I wasn't. I was very uptight and very anxious. Up to the point where I was looking for another job, and I got the interviews, and I put my notice of resignation in. When I went out with my my sales manager, having already resigned, and it was the best sales calls I ever did. And we came out, and he's like, well, what happened? You're now a super salesperson, and before you just couldn't sell water to people who were... And I realized that when you do sales, the attitude of how you sell is as important, if not more important, than the words that come out of your mouth.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It's the style of interaction. It's not being uptight, not making people nervous, not making people anxious. And that has sort of carried on since then. Nobody cares what goes on inside.
No, there's a lot of psychology in sales, because I did a joint degree and half of it was psychology. And it was so much that we were, at the time, all this behavioral psychology like Freud and Jung, and I was like, oh, really? But it actually came in quite useful to learn about the human psyche. And just so that people are aware, the cardiac rhythm management, the pacemakers, that was the start of Medtronic. Earl Bakken invented a pacemaker, and that's how to. So this is the crown jewel of the Medtronic portfolio.
Yes, yeah, this is
You'd gone into.
the very core of Medtronic's business is the pacemakers. Yeah.
Wow.
You know what I'm just realizing? I think it happened to all of us. When we started in MedTech, we all have the same stories. Like we arrived at an interview, we had no clue, they explained us a job, and we could learn and we had a career. When you go for an interview today, it's like you need to know everything, you have to come from the direct competition. But I always think like these people from the time where it happened like it happened to us. They are managers now. So why are they so scared now to go for someone who doesn't know the product? Because it never happens anymore.
Well, certain companies.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that's completely true. I think having somebody who understands the industry is helpful, but having someone with the right attitude is probably even more important. So I think in my history, I've hired people in from other industries who've gone on to be super successful, who haven't just moved sideways from J&J to Medtronic or from Stryker or Boston or at some time Guidance. So yeah,
Exactly. I think the most important thing when I'm hiring is that you understand how hospitals and medical facilities buy, right, in your region or country. That's the most important thing, because it's how is the product reimbursed and what is the purchase process in the hospital, right, for example. And if you understand that, and you should be able to learn, we should be able to teach you that anatomy area, that disease state, and the product, right? That
I
should,
totally agree with you. But
yeah,
when you look at LinkedIn today, it says something different. And that's why I'm always surprised that it has changed, obviously.
yeah. But it
it's
also depends on the jobs. So when
yeah,
I was running sales organizations, then absolutely that's true. But then when you start expanding and you're hiring reimbursement specialists, you're hiring regulatory specialists, quality and clinical, then it's a sort of different thing when you start looking at a broader organization rather than just the commercial piece.
And it will change again because now, with all the new technologies, we cannot hire from someone else because this knowledge doesn't exist, right? So we need to go back to this openness we had before.
Hmm. So tell us, you started out, you just started in the CRM business in the UK, in Scotland still, and you ended your Medtronic career vice president of one of the four biggest regions in Europe, RTG, or what did RTG stand for at the time?
Restorative Therapies Group.
That's the one, right? So tell us that journey. That was what, 15 years of your life?
Give or take, yes.
Yeah.
So I was in Scotland for, I think, 3 or 4 years. So in total, I lived in Scotland, in Edinburgh for 10 years.
Right. Very.
So I did 3 years as a sales rep in Brady, and did pretty well in a very competitive market, and then wanted to do something more. So for a while, I'd started saving up to do an MBA, which is going into debt. I saved the money beforehand, and then got Medtronic to part sponsor me for that. So the deal was I had to stay for another year, hit my targets, and then Medtronic would cover some of the costs. I covered the costs, and I actually got a grant from the local education authority to part cover my MBA as well.
Wow.
So that was good. I think as I left Medtronic, the sales manager I had at the time, who was looking after the CRDM business for that part of the country, tried to convince me to stay and said, leaving Medtronic as a Brady rep, this is the best job you're ever going to have. So really think hard about whether you should be doing this. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm good. So went off to do the MBA in Edinburgh. My daughter was born at the time. My wife was finishing her PhD also at the same time. So it was quite a busy academic and poor household.
Wow.
And then as I finished, I started looking around for jobs. So I went back to Medtronic in the UK, spoke to the HR person, and her response was just submit an email and a CV online, and then we'll see what we can find you. So I thought, all right, screw you.
Yeah.
And then started looking around, got quite far in interviews with Stryker, was looking at Boston Sci as well. And then I got a message from my old sales manager, Mark Kerrigan, who said that the ENT business were looking for somebody for a couple of positions, and would I be interested in meeting? Absolutely.
Yes.
Went down to London, met up with a guy called Vince Ricano, who was the head of the international business for Medtronic ENT. And he had a couple of positions going. One was to set up the organization in ASEAN, so Southeast Asia. And they wanted somebody, because I was going to be the first person there. So they wanted someone who could actually do the face-to-face sales and who could then set up the infrastructure with the local Medtronic organization to bring the ENT business into the formal Medtronic structure, because at the time everything was being sold directly from the business unit in the US. So yeah, that was the big move. So leaving Edinburgh with my wife and almost 1-year-old daughter and moving to Singapore for 3 years. So when Medtronic offered me the position, it was to set up the ENT business in Southeast Asia. So I originally went over to manage ASEAN and Korea as the ENT business manager, which is a very diverse region from Myanmar and Cambodia to the streets of Seoul and Singapore are very different. And then after a while, I changed responsibility and was looking after ENT and neuro. So part of the neuro business is just for ASEAN. So yeah, I was there for 3 years, set up the distribution network, hired distributors across the region, ran training sessions, and the business really took off. It went from a couple of 100,000 to sort of mid-single digit millions over that period, and the foundation was laid for a successful business.
Yes.
And when you talk about hiring people with different skills, so one of the first people I hired was a gentleman called Golf Sopon in Thailand, and his background was selling telecommunications into the United Nations and the diplomatic sectors. And he took over as the sales manager for Thailand, and I think he's now country manager for Stryker for Thailand. So yeah, he's had a very good career, has done extremely well, and came into the industry with no knowledge at all.
Matt, I have a question for people who work in such a huge organization. How did you land your first leadership role? Because there are so many people working there who might have the same goal to have the first leadership role.
Yeah. So my first, when I took the position in ASEAN, I became a leader, a manager without any direct reports. So I was at the same level of seniority, but without a team. And then when there was a reorganization to include the neuro business in ASEAN, then we became a team of 3. So I sort of got reorganized into my first management position. What I found really hard was not the first management position. That sort of comes around with doing a good job as an individual contributor and being helpful and going above and beyond your role. Where I found it really difficult was the step from manager of a reasonable sized team to director. So in Medtronic, that step was more difficult than the step from director to vice president.
What made it so difficult for you?
It was so competitive. There was the business that I was in was with ENT was at the time was very small, and there is not very many senior positions within that business. So then you look at the wider Medtronic business, and you've got lots of very skilled, very talented people with lots of different backgrounds coming in for those positions. So the step up to director was really difficult and really competitive. So that was the hardest step.
Yeah.
How did your management style change by growing in your career?
So my management style changed a lot, also because of the geographies. So when I was first managing people in ASEAN, particularly dealing with people in Thailand, you've got to be very gentle and very calm, and you can't lose your temper, and everything has to be explained quietly, and just the style of communication has got to be very gentle. And then my first management position when I moved to Switzerland in Tolo in Medtronic's EMEA office, I had 2 Polish ladies who worked for me who were both product managers.
Yeah.
And my experience was you are very calm and you're very gentle and you explain things in a very roundabout way. And at the end of the meeting, one of them turned to me and was like, well, that's great, but what do you want me to do? So it's like, okay, don't tell me all that blah, blah, blah. What do you want me to do? And I will go and do it. So the style of communication I learned depends a lot on who's hearing it and what they are used to. So yes, you need to accommodate your team and they need to accommodate you. And there's always a settling in period as that happens. But the style of communication, maybe you can't get much more different between maybe the Dutch and the Polish and the Thais. That's quite an extreme.
That's true.
I'm thinking about golf. I mean, when you spot your leaders in your team, how do you spot them and develop and nurture them? What's your philosophy around that?
So partly it's looking at the style. It's looking at how people interact with others.
Yes.
seeing what their peer group think of them and how they interact with them. So if you've got somebody in a company, you look at how well they're regarded, who are the people that they're friendly with, who are the people they interact with, who do they work well with. You look at whether they create problems for you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they're speaking up about things that are not going well, that's a good thing to have. Someone who's willing to talk up and not just keep their head down and do everything you say. So you need someone who's able to flag problems, who's able to think for themselves, who's able to be constructive, but who will ultimately, once you've thought through the process and discussed it, do what's asked. So it's being able to raise problems and discuss them, but ultimately get on with what's asked of them.
Yeah. And I know that in your product line that you were managing, I mean, you were doing interventions into the spine, into the brain.
Yeah.
You had super smart people working for you as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So the different businesses that I was in Medtronic included DBS, so deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's, essential tremor, and epilepsy.
Yes.
So yes, there were some of the sort of scientists that I met at Medtronic were connected to that business. They were very passionate about it, and that's a business that Medtronic actually created.
Yes.
With the clinicians in Grenoble. So yeah, they were very, very smart. And then you have the spine organization, which was very execution focused, the logistics. So spine and orthopedics as businesses are basically logistics organizations with a little bit of medicine attached. So it's all about shipping the kits and shipping the implants and the boxes, and there's huge big metal trays that need to be moved from one place to another.
Yes.
So there's a lot of logistics, and then it's a very competitive market. So it's a very, very tough sales force that need to go out and get the business. And then you have a different skill set again, because I used to run Medtronic's NT business, navigation business, that had the big capital equipment.
Yes.
Spine is hard because you've got to fight for the implants every day, and then on the other side, you're trying to sell at $1.3 million interruptive MRI machines. So that's a whole different sales process. And you only have a very small number of customers per country that you can possibly target. So it's a very different skill.
Wow. And I remember,
Go ahead.
I remember sitting in on one meeting, and one of your product managers, I think he even had a medical degree, but he was demonstrating, showing how you had this drill a hole in the person's skull and insert this needle specifically. And I was thinking, wow, we were doing laparoscopic surgery, taking a gallbladder off of a liver, and bariatric surgery. But I was thinking, this is next level. Not to denigrate the surgical division, but I just thought you got to know this stuff inside out, right? To direct physicians and surgeons through this new technology.
Yeah. No, I think you're talking about Visualize, I think, which is a laser ablation done inside an MRI for tumors. So yeah, very, very specialized procedures.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a pacemaker rep, I had to pass 4 exams before they would let me go and talk to doctors on my own.
Yeah.
So I had to do the curriculum, the training, and pass the exams. So yeah, they were at the time. Medtronic were very, very strict about you being able to do that, and for the ENT division as well. I had to go and pass exams in the US organization, and if you didn't pass, you didn't graduate your probationary period.
Yes. You were out of a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Puts a lot of pressure, and some companies still operate that process. Yeah. Typically, people who left Covidien Medtronic and went to set up training programs somewhere else took the same process. Or Tyco, I should even say Tyco from back in the day. Yeah, incredible. And one thing I observe in these large companies, right? Because we met because I was in charge of robotics, and it was like, hey, Matt Curran also has the other big high-end capital equipment and robotic technology. So why don't you go talk to him? Because you must have, do the same job, right? But it's actually a very small part. I mean, yes, the capital sales process is very similar. But as you go deeper into it, it gets quite different, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of some of the back end stuff could be common, like the service organizations. You need to have field engineers that need to be close enough to the customers to get there within whatever your contracted window is, be it 2 hours or 12 hours. So yes, some of that can be common, but it's different customer groups. It's similar-ish hospitals sometimes, but certainly different departments. And we were coming in as the sort of premium provider of spine implants, so either market leader or number 2 in just about any given country. And this was an enabling technology for spine implants. And so we were going in as the market leader, and you as Medtronic were going in against Intuitive, where you were very clearly not the market leader in medical robots.
Definitely not. But it
This
was.
would have been my question. How is it to launch a product when you know that there is by far a market leader active already? And where do you get your motivation from?
Well, that's easy. It's easy being second. You've always got someone to target, or
Yes.
third, or fourth. I mean, that's by far the easiest. Enemy is the wrong word, but you've got somebody to go after. You've got somebody's share to take. That's very easy to motivate. It's much more difficult when you're the market leader and you've got big market share and you've got to keep it. That's much harder.
Really.
That's true. But in terms of motivation, I always enjoyed being the first one
Well,
and to
maybe
be hunted.
there's a psychology there that maybe is for a different
Yeah.
discussion. But yeah, no, I always found that trying to take somebody down, trying to grow your business was always more motivating than trying to keep the business you'd already got.
Yeah, being a follower can be so much easier, especially in our market where you sometimes have to set up reimbursement codes. You have to do all the clinical studies before clinicians will say, okay, there's enough evidence here for me to try the product. Convert the early adopters, the key opinion leaders. You got to do all that work up front, and somebody else comes along and just says, oh, thank you for
Yeah.
that, appreciate it. And can we have a piece of your market share while we're at it? But the top company, there is, I think, first mover advantage is there, but in some cases it can be a complete myth, right?
I
It's
mean,
not. Yeah.
yeah, there's examples. So for DBS, Medtronic was alone as the only provider for deep brain stimulation for a decade and a half, I think. And even when the competition came in, it wasn't serious. Now it's a completely different proposition. Boston and Abbott have got very serious devices, and there's a number of other companies as well. But for a long time, we were the only people in the market, and we were preparing these defensive strategies for what happens when someone comes in the market, and discussion with the global business leadership saying, you can't lose market share. It's like, that's actually never going to happen. You're at 100%, and there are people you have pissed off,
Yes.
and they have no alternatives. So just by having an alternative, you will lose share.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other aspect, when you reached like you were vice president at the business, and you were doing something that not many people that we've interviewed doing, is you were leading leaders.
Yes.
So there were layers of leadership that were under. How many people were there in your complete organization in Europe?
I think at one point it was like 800 and something.
800 people. And your direct reports were how many?
I had 13 directors.
Yeah, 13 directors, and then numbers of people, managers below that, and then the people at the ground level. How do you lead an organization like that? Because you're a little bit far away from ground level. How do you ensure that your messages, what you want to achieve, that cascades down through the organization?
So the first thing is when you get to a position like that, all of your team are good. Everybody who is in your organization at a director and senior director, they're all really good. They know their job. They know how to do it. They understand the businesses of their respective countries or their respective functions. So in that regard, it's easier because you're dealing with a whole room of very competent people. You're also dealing with a room of very ambitious people because they didn't get to that point just by being good. They're good and they're ambitious.
Yes.
So it's different from managing your first team of salespeople, where you have some ambitious people and some people who are doing it as a job and they need to be home to collect the kids. So
Yeah.
there's different levels of motivation. But no, it's very encouraging that you've got lots of very interesting discussions. You've got very dynamic discussions because you're dealing with a team of really smart people that really know what they're doing. In terms of how you get your messages across, we used to do a review by country where we would go into the countries and have the sales managers present their sales organizations. So you would interact not necessarily with the reps, but you'd interact with the managers, the first line sales managers,
Right.
and talk to them about their organization and how it's working and the development and the high performance and the low performance. So you got to the point where you were primarily interacting with the first line management. And then when you went to exhibitions, which I tried to go to all the big exhibitions, then you'd start to interact with some of the sales team. And if you had meetings with customers, it would be the local sales reps that would be there as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's how you kept your finger on the pulse at the ground level. And you had sitting next to you the director who's the head of those.
For the countries, yeah.
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 Amazing. And then from there, how many people do you manage now?
We are a team of 24.
Okay. But that's grown from what? Just two of you?
Well, we started looking at NanoFlex, or the idea behind NanoFlex, probably in October. I got involved with it seriously in October 2020.
Yes.
And then we managed to get the first funding and started in the Wyss Zurich Center in May 21.
Yes.
And at the time, there was the three of us who were the co-founders. One stayed in the ETH as a professor, and two of us, Christoph and I, were the operational leaders of NanoFlex, and we had three people who we started the company with.
Yeah.
How did you get in contact with these people,
I
with these
can answer that
engineers?
question. That was me.
That was Mesh.
Yeah, I met Brad Nelson, and he's the professor at the University of Zurich, and just an incredible academic working on nanorobots and just super smart person. A lovely guy, and we got on, and he told me about this company that they were looking to form. And I didn't, raising money and starting a company like that wasn't my forte, but I said, I know exactly the guy you should be talking to. And then I called up one of your team, Donna, and I asked Donna, do you think Matt would be interested in this? She said, absolutely, call him. So I was like, great. So I called you and I connected you to Brad, and then you guys formed this company, Christian, yourself, and Brad, which was, I'm delighted to have had a very tiny part in that. But
yeah, absolutely, you did.
where you went from there and what you guys have done in such a short period of time is impressive.
But Matt, where did you learn the fundraising part? I don't know if you had to do something in Medtronic already, or was it from scratch?
No,
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So it's from scratch. So part of it I already know because it's sales. I'm selling a company, I'm selling a vision. But where I've had to learn, and I'm continuing to learn, is the language around it, the network. So I could probably connect with pretty much any specialist clinician in the world with 3 phone calls. But the whole finance world was new to me and is still relatively new to me. So that's what I'm learning.
And what inspired this step for you to move from such a huge company to a relatively small company? Because is the environment, the pace, the culture, what was it?
Yeah, I think that's a good. I was going to ask the same, because you could have gone to any of the big corporates, right? With your level of experience and knowledge, managing a team of 800 people. There is not that many people who can manage a team of 800 people, right? But you chose to go right at the other end of the spectrum, right? To a startup with 3 people. And there wasn't even a company set up. You set it up, right?
We set it up.
That's an interesting decision.
So towards the end of my career in Medtronic merged with Covidian, and there was a big cultural change within the organization. Medtronic became much more focused on profit and dividends than it was. And let's be clear, Medtronic was not focused on money before, but it became very, very much more focused on profitability. And the sort of last 3 years there, as in different vice president roles, was constantly being squeezed to give more and more profit, more and more leverage to the organization. So I was in a large business that was growing slowly in Europe with declining prices. And every year I was asked for, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4% top line growth and 5 or 7% bottom line growth. So the only way to do that in a market with declining prices is to cut your costs.
Yes.
So I went through multiple different organizational changes, reduce the organization, increase the scope of people's jobs, put different jobs together, put different teams together. And after a while, you realize that's not really fun. So you're dealing with a business that's already very profitable, trying to squeeze it to be a little bit more profitable. And in the process, I was reporting into a geography boss and 4 different business unit bosses, so global business unit presidents. And they each wanted a different thing. Put this sales organization together, and I had one business unit president that was interested in market share above all else. I had another one that was interested in top line revenue and didn't care about the profit margin. I had one that was only interested in the profit margin and didn't care about the top line growth. And this is the same organizations.
Yeah.
Because of the previous year's instructions, it had been amalgamated into one sales force. And you can't do all of those different things effectively because they pull in opposite directions. And I just got to the point where I was thinking, okay, this is not fun anymore. I wanted to do something constructive. I wanted to do something positive. I wanted something to grow. So I was looking for, and I thought the culture in different big organizations is probably a little bit different, but might not be dramatically different. So I wanted to look at something else, and I was looking at sort of small and medium-sized companies. And when you introduced me to Brad, initially my thought was to go in as an advisor and maybe a board member. But when I actually saw the technology that they had, I was completely blown away. I had a good idea what was in the market, and what they were showing me as engineering prototypes was like nothing else I'd seen.
Yes.
So
Can you share something about the technology? We know you're not commercial yet, but maybe there's something you can share.
Because at the time, Silke, you and I were competitors to this technology. We were doing Corindus.
I know, Cash, but maybe not everyone who's listening
Yeah,
to
no,
this
that's true. I
podcast
just wanted you to
knows.
be so. Yeah, I think it's
So
an incredible
maybe.
technology. But go ahead, Matt. Tell us what it does.
So essentially, these guys have been working for 18, 20 years on electromagnets. So they're looking at being able to use electromagnets to move devices in space. And they started looking at how can you control free-swimming micro and nano robots for potential for targeted drug delivery. And then realized that in order to do that, you needed to be able to get your micro and nano robots quite close to the target. And that's where the evolution towards looking at wires and catheters to sort of create a portfolio of products came in. So it's a system where you have small permanent magnets embedded in a device like a wire or a catheter or an endoscope, and then you put it inside the magnetic field. And because of the way you can manipulate the magnetic field, you can move the devices in three-dimensional space. So at the time, the only robotics that were on the market in this area were Robocath and Corindus, which were both mechanical systems that used wheels and wires and pulleys to move standard devices in standard ways to try and mimic what the hand of the doctor does, with a few semi-automated features on top. What the technology that ultimately became NanoFlex could do is bend the devices 360 degrees in and out of plane and go to places that it's impossible to go to with standard equipment, and to do things that doctors can't do with their hands. We were always talking about we don't want to just mimic what the doctor can do, because we'll never be as good as that. We want to be able to do things that the doctors can't do, and this technology allows you to do that.
Exactly. So the magnets are driving the tip of the catheter,
Correct.
whereas the other technologies and the clinician is working outside the body at the back end of the catheter and trying to steer the front end of the catheter. So I think it's an absolute game changer and
Correct.
a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
A little bit like that movie where they shrunk down and went inside the human body. Right?
Inner space, yes.
Inner space, yes. It's that. And what kind of disease states are you looking to be able to attack with this type of technology?
So with what we have, we can move devices through any tube system in the body. So we can move it through the blood vessels, we can move it through the digestive system, we can move it through the lungs, anywhere there's a tube. We started looking, initially we were looking at endoscopy as a business potential for us, because you can have single-use endoscopes that are steered with a magnet. So a patient sits in front of the magnet and you do a transnasal esophagoscopy, or you can have the patient lying and do colonoscopies. And the technology is very able to do that. But when we started to get into the analysis of it, we realized that although it is a big market, and it's really a very, very big market, the revenue per case is not very high. And the cost of making single-use endoscopes is actually quite significant. So the margin you make on each product is not high. And then we started looking at comparable products. If you have your single-use endoscope and you take out your chip camera and your lens and all of the stuff on the inside of the endoscope, you create a catheter. And then you start looking at some of the catheter procedures, peripheral vascular, neurovascular, and cardiovascular, and they are reimbursed significantly higher than the endoscopy procedures for a much lower cost of manufacture device. So that's how we started looking at the interventions. And with the magnetic navigation, it lends itself to moving devices through the most difficult and tortuous anatomy you can. So the more complicated it is, the bigger the benefit. And that's where we started ending up towards neuro. So navigating through the neurovascular anatomy is very complicated. And if you can get to target locations, you can perform procedures which are life-threatening, particularly things around the treatment for ischemic stroke. So that's sort of how we ended up looking at neuro as an initial target area. And then during the development, we started to realize that you can control our robotic system standing next to it, or you can control it from a couple of meters away with a joystick. But if you can control it from 2 meters away with a joystick, you can control it from 1,000 miles away with a joystick. So then that led us to start thinking about the remote thrombectomy for ischemic stroke. So if you're in a rural community and you have a stroke, you're not going to be able to present to a hospital that's able to deal with it within a time window that's going to allow you to be effectively treated. So then the remote aspiration thrombectomy starts to become a potentially transformational therapy. And there's a number of companies that are looking at this now because the market potential, the social potential, and the business potential of this is so immense.
Yes. So basically, you have a stroke. It doesn't matter how far away you are from the expert clinician. The ambulance that comes to you could have the equipment, or they could take you to the nearest health center, potentially. You could be in rural Yorkshire, but the doctor is in University College Hospital, London, right?
Yeah, so the hospital needs to have a minimum infrastructure, so it needs to have imaging equipment like a monoplane imaging, which you would find in most district hospitals that have a cardiology service. So there's many more cardiology services than there are interventional neuro services.
Yes.
Or interventional vascular services. So it needs a minimum infrastructure. But yeah, then you can have somebody dial in from anywhere. Ideally, you have a point-to-point wide internet connection. But yes, the actual technology is not limited by that.
This is really creating tomorrow's world.
And then there's other stuff that we're working on where you start looking at semi-automated navigation. So we've been working with a company called Brainomics on being able to design assisted navigation. So it tells the doctor how to steer the magnetic field to get to the target location. So that increases you can get to the target location much faster. But then that's the first step towards semi-autonomous navigation. The doctor no longer just says, this is the target, give me the instructions to drive there. The machine can actually drive itself there. So then you start to think, if you can do semi-autonomous, you could ultimately do a completely autonomous procedure.
Yes.
So the technology is not going to be the limiting factor for an autonomous procedure. It's going to be the legal liability, medical responsibility. It's going to be the reimbursement. But the technology itself for doing something like this is much easier than a self-driving car.
Yeah. How are the clinicians taking this to this technology? How are they, when you presented this at congresses and meetings, what's been the reaction?
So very, very positive. So they see the potential for it for in-hospital procedures for very complicated aneurysms because of how you can steer the device to targets that are very difficult to reach. Everybody who does interventional neuro has cases where the patients present after multiple hours and they know as soon as they come in that they're not going to get a good outcome because it's taken too long.
Yes.
So the potential for doing something faster is clear. There's different ideas about how that should be done. But yeah, there's a general appreciation that if you can treat the patients effectively faster, then everybody's interested in doing that. So the feedback is pretty much universally positive. I had one Italian clinician very early on that we showed it to that got really angry with us because he said that he'd spent 20 years learning how to do this, and then you can give a kid with a computer game experience the same skill set as him. But with that one aside, it's been universally positive.
Absolutely. Making it easier and more standardized and being able to give them something that they were not able to do.
Yeah.
It's a win-win-win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing is the working conditions for the clinicians. So this is something that you guys were talking about at Curran. Doctors have got to stand next to the X-ray machine all day.
Yeah.
And from the clinicians, this is a big thing for them. They would like to avoid it if they can. You talk to the hospital management, they generally don't care because by the time the doctors are sick, they've retired. But for the doctors themselves, they're really interested in their own welfare, not surprisingly.
Yeah, the radiation therapy room where there's, that X-ray is running constantly is probably the most hazardous place in the entire hospital for clinicians, right?
Yeah.
And you're taking them out of that room and into a safe space. That's a real plus as well. Amazing. Silke.
Yeah, Matt, can we ask to share some advice for people who want to start in the MedTech? So with your experience in this big corporate environment and startup company, and I think everyone gets excited when you talk about startup companies, but when I want to start in MedTech, what would be your advice? Where should I start? And maybe in what position?
I think it depends on what your interest is. So if you're interested in the engineering or the clinical, then it's obviously a very different route from being interested in the sales or the technical support. The first thing is you need to get some experience. You need to spend some time maybe in hospitals. You need to spend some time with people in the industry and just get a feel for whether the job is for you or not. because you might think it's for you, and then the first time you go into an operating theatre, you realize it smells weird, it looks weird, it's a bit cold, everybody's busy, and getting your head around the fact that people are having a conversation about what they did last night while somebody's chest is cracked open on the table in front of you, that's weird. So if you're not used to that, then you need to get your head around, can you live in and work in this environment? So
Yes.
I think for me, that's the first thing is are you okay with what the job actually is? So yes,
Mhm.
driving around and the presenting, but ultimately, if you're doing surgical equipment, you need to be comfortable going into surgery and not freaking out and not falling over.
Yes.
Which does happen. You do have people that potentially are great candidates, and they go in the first time they smell the diathermy machine go, they run out the room and throw up. So
Yeah, that is something. My first case was a knee surgery, and I went in, stood in the OR. He put skin to knife, and I thought to myself, okay, here we go. Let's see if I can handle this. And yeah, it was okay.
yeah, no. So I think just as a very very first thing, can you handle that? Now, if you're doing reimbursement, then obviously that's not necessarily something you need to worry about, or even some of the engineering. And ultimately, the engineers need to see how the cases work to design the products. And then so it's from that, then looking for work experience, looking for entry level positions. And I would suggest don't necessarily go for the most glamorous companies and the most glamorous. If you do something sort of dull and you do something for a company that's maybe not so exciting, then you learn a lot, because if you're with the biggest company, your business card opens the doors. It's nothing to do with you,
Mhm.
the fact of who you represent. Whereas if you build up your own experience and knowledge and credibility, then there's a confidence that you get in your own ability. So
Yes.
that's where I would think about starting.
You know, that's so true. I remember sitting outside a hospital purchaser's office, right? I was working for Medtronic, and I'm sitting outside a hospital purchaser's office waiting to see him. There was somebody else in the room talking to him. So eventually that appointment finished. That other person came out, walked past me, left. I walked in and I said, hi, I'm Cash from Medtronic. And the purchaser said to me, the guy that just left was from Medtronic. You know him? And I was like, never seen him in my life, right? So when you work for a corporation that's that big, right? There could be 20, 30 people from your company in in one hospital and you don't know each other, right? Because it's that big. I want to go to your advice for people who are in these corporates, right? So I tell you, my journey was I was sitting there one day thinking, this growing feeling when I got home at night was, what did I do to move the needle for patients for healthcare today? Did I, I sat in all these meetings. We had a lot of discussions. I did up-teen calls. And this was like eating away at me from a week to a month to years. Like, what have I contributed? I got into this business to help patients, but what have I actually moved the needle? And that's when I decided, right, I'm not going to stay with big companies. I'm going to go startup. I'm going to go small, right? So if you're in a big corporate and you're feeling that way, right, it's a bit scary, right, to go. What would you took that leap, that plunge? What would you say to them?
So I think there's things that you can do before you have to take the plunge. So if you are sitting in a big corporate and you can influence a lot more in terms of your reach within healthcare provision than maybe people think you can. So if you can influence how you go to market, how you would address different patient needs, and you have an organization of multiple hundreds of salespeople, you can have a big effect. Whereas if you say, okay, right, I'm taking my ball, I'm going home, then the next job, maybe there's 3 of you or there's 5 of you. So the first bit is you can't have as big an effect
Yes.
if you are on your own as if you are in a big organization institution. Then the second thing is if you're thinking about your job, when you get to a certain level, you're running a business. And the type of business is, I'm not going to say it's not important, but the discussions you have when you're running a big organization for Medtronic is maybe not that different from running any other big organization in any other big blue chip company. So it's about your profit, it's about your margins, about your marketing strategy, it's about your HR and retention strategy. So you can think that maybe 50 or 60% of the job is common between people in different industries when you get to that level of seniority. But that's when it becomes more dangerous, because you have to remember what you're doing is not making cigarettes or making guns or petrochemicals. What you're actually doing is ultimately saving people's lives.
Yes.
So you have to sort of keep that that patient-focused bit as part of it. Moving on to do something yourself, yes, as it was with me, my focus was all on the financial profitability of the big company, less so than the actual number of patients you help. I mean, obviously that's part of it, but the day-to-day job of running a big organization is the business metrics. Whereas when you move into a smaller company, you can have much more impact on the patients because you're closer to them, because you see them. But then you get different problems. So if you're in a startup, you're worried about, are you going to be able to make payroll? What's your cash flow? What's your financial run rate? I never worried about whether Medtronic was going to be able to afford to pay people, because of course they printed money. And when you're in startups, you have different problems, different things to worry about.
Yes.
So yeah, being in a big company was a great experience, but also being in a startup is a great experience in a very different way.
Yes.
Okay, Matt, I think you shared so much information and we are overwhelmed. That's why it might be a little bit repetitive, our final question, but to summarize, I think it's still good to ask. What are the 3 things you know now that you wish you would have known then? Or in other words, what would Matt recommend to the younger Matt?
So the first, by a long way, would have been pay attention at school for languages.
Yes.
So when I was 16, it was beyond my comprehension that maybe I'd leave the northwest of England, maybe I'd go to Leeds, but that was about the sum scope of my geographical ambition. And here I am, multiple decades later, married to a lady with a French passport, living in a francophone environment, having lived in countries that are not English speaking. Pay more attention in class for languages. Maybe that's going to become obsolete in a few years with the translational technology, but really that's the first thing. The second thing, which is I sort of already knew, but has become more and more important, is treat people professionally as you wish to be treated yourself. And where that's important, at the start of your career, you don't think it's important. You're sort of trying to climb the greasy pole, and you want to be you're ambitious and you want the next job. But then a few years later, you realize you come across the people who you are competing with, and depending on how you competed with them, either they're going to be your enemies for life, or they can help you in different turns. And as you move through your career, if you stay in the same industry, you'll see the same faces over and over again. And if you behave well to people, even if you don't agree with them, even if you end up having to separate from them with different work environments, you have to behave responsibly to people and professionally to people, because tomorrow's subordinate is today's manager. So you never know how it's going to swing around. And then the third thing I was sort of thinking about, ultimately, it's you need to have fun with what you're doing. Both, I think maybe all of us have been in big corporate jobs where it's fun for a while and then it sort of stops being fun. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of politics, and you've got to stay positive, and you've got to stay having fun, because journey's short and you need to make sure it's worth riding up.
Yeah, 100%. This is great advice. Thank you for sharing so much of your vast experience and your knowledge. You've had an incredible career that we can all learn from. I mean, if somebody has a follow-up question, they can just ping you on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the business that you stood up from the ground up is absolutely incredible. I strongly believe it's going to be a game changer, and we wish you great success in this endeavor.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been fun. It's been a nice discussion. Hopefully things go well for you too as well. But yeah, NanoFlex, if we do it right, it could be really transformational.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Riemer and Tash Ikran. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.